Hello and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. On behalf of OTC Markets, we are very pleased you have joined us for our Digital Asset Conference. Our first presentation of the day is from Africa Bitcoin Corporation. Please note you may submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for a one-on-one meeting by clicking Book a Meeting. At this point, I am very pleased to welcome Stafford Massey, Executive Chairman and Director of Bitcoin Strategy of Africa Bitcoin Corporation, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol AFBCF and on the JSE under the symbol BAC and on the Frankfurt Bourse under the symbol 4BC. Welcome, Stafford.
Thank you for having me, Greg, and welcome everyone. It is such a pleasure to finally present an African Bitcoin strategy company, the first ever in the world, to everyone watching in today. It's quite a pleasure. It's quite daunting presenting when you don't actually see the audience, so it's just yourself and the slides, but I'm going to try my best to step through and introduce you to a company that I think is quite profound. We're the world's first Bitcoin-powered credit company. So if you take a look at the attributes of who we are, we listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. We've been trading for 3 years. So we're not a startup. It's not a startup idea. What we're doing is we're taking a private credit engine, and what we're doing is we're superpowering it. We're plugging in this incredible asset called Bitcoin into that engine and creating something novel, something not seen before, but in principle, something that seems very obvious after the fact. We're taking private credit, we're wrapping it up with Bitcoin, and we're delivering something that was previously unimagined because we finally have this beautiful collateral. We finally have perfect money. We finally have an asset that's a digital commodity that doesn't have an issuer. And we're utilizing this to take advantage of the Pan-African opportunity. I think that's quite important about us too. So I'm going to unpack this in a lot of detail as we go through the slides. So bear with me. Let's go. So the world's first Bitcoin-powered private credit company and the first Bitcoin treasury company in Africa. So let's take a look at some of our characteristics. So we have a cash generative core. So like I said, we're a company that is 3 years old. We've been trading on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange for 3 years already. And we have a private credit engine that is quite lucrative. We've raised capital for many SMMEs, and we've impacted thousands of jobs in Africa. What we're doing right now is taking that core business and we're wrapping Bitcoin around it. And I'm going to show you how we are actually taking Bitcoin and creating this beautiful flywheel between our private credit engine and the Bitcoin itself. And I think that's also novel. In today's world, we see a lot of Bitcoin treasury companies that accumulate the asset and then sit and wait for the asset to grow. And they'll accretively dilute on basis on the performance of Bitcoin. We are not dependent on the performance of Bitcoin. Yes, we can do the traditional Bitcoin treasury play, but our core private credit model generates enough cash to keep the business growing and accretively aggregate into our Bitcoin treasury. And I'll unpack that in a little bit more detail. So operations day to day, we originate and manage secure loans to productive SMMEs. So these are double securitized businesses, Pan-African, that are incredible businesses. But notice the yield. The loans are going out between 18 and 22%. Now, as an American or European or anyone in one of the G8 countries, your eyebrows may raise. Yes, we operate in a market that's completely different from your market. We are a Bitcoin treasury company that's operating in an environment where capital is low and yields are high. If you take a look at the United States, where Treasury and some of the others, Michael Saylor and his company is, he operates in a world where there are low yields, but high capital. In a world like that, you utilize the Bitcoin to generate yield. In a world where we exist, you use Bitcoin to harvest the yield. So let's go. So operations day to day, that's the yield, 18 to 22% interest we can get on our SMME-based loans. Now imagine I could take Bitcoin and I could bring fiat to its knees, and I can get a lower cost of capital. I can deploy into a very high yield environment with significant returns. So reporting currency, IFRS standards, and obviously in ZAR. On the right-hand side, it shows where we're currently listed in the world. In the USA, we're on OTCQB. In Namibia, the reason we did Namibia first was to demonstrate our Pan-African prowess and capabilities and acumen. So as much as we trade on the JSE, which is a bourse that is highly liquid, it is the largest on the African continent, and there's really nowhere else on the African continent where you can do a Bitcoin treasury company. And we've done it on the JSE, and I think we're quite proud of another fact that we call it the Africa Bitcoin Corporation. out of all the Bitcoin treasury companies, we have Bitcoin in our name. That's how much we believe in the asset. But that shows you we are we'll be expanding into different African markets. We're in South Africa, we're in Europe, we're in the USA. If you take a look at our future listings, bottom right, very eminently Aquis, we've got Botswana, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Nigeria, Eswatini, essentially presenting globally the world to Africa on a pan-African de-risked basis. And I'll unpack that a little bit more as we move along. So if you take a look at our loan book as of our last reporting date, I just want to emphasize the numbers on this slide is outdated. Our current loan book, based upon our current mandates in our private credit engine, sits with an additional $10 million. It just hasn't been updated yet, but this is as of our last reporting date. Again, we are a publicly traded company, so I've got to make sure that I stick to the numbers that we've put out there. So our financial overview, you can see the capital deployed since inception, $20 million. The value of the security is the security of the loans is $40 million. Our assets under management is $30 million. I think a key number on this slide is that next number, 18.45%. That's the average loan. That's the yield that we can generate from our loans. But I want you to look at the number directly below that. And that's at 12 to 15%. That's our weighted average cost of capital. That's our WACC. Our average cost of capital is that amount because we today get the money from our private credit engine from large asset capital allocators like pension funds. Pension funds deploy their capital into us, and then we deploy that into the SMMEs on a very conservative lending basis. But notice our weighted average cost of capital is between 12 and 15%. That's quite high. What Bitcoin allows us to do is take that down to single digits. And that's the exciting bit. So if you take a look at our core business, that's profitable, 3 years old, highly regulated, public. Take a look at our average cost of capital. Now notice, if I can take Bitcoin and I can do a conservative loan to value of 30% on that Bitcoin at an interest rate below 5%, just imagine what that does to that number. So two numbers I think are quite important, or three numbers on the slide. Number one, the 18% average across the loans, the average cost of capital. And I think if you go bottom left, you'll take a look at bad debts. Across our book, we sit with a loan book of less than 0.08% bad debt. So the key thing here that I want to emphasize is bottom right. Africa is not risk. Africa is a yield source. And we represent the entire continent. And I think that's a key attribute of us. Again, the fact that we can bring an entire continent, not a country. We bring an entire continent to the table. And that's quite exciting. So the market demand, let's define how big the African market is in terms of structural capital gaps and market demand. So massive SMME funding, despite there being incredible businesses. And in Africa, resource-rich youth entrepreneurs, we have businesses that are incredibly entrepreneurial. Businesses that we invest in are businesses that are scaling independent of their circumstances at interest rates, between 12 and 15%, all the way up to 22%, we deploy in the capital. The demand for that across Africa is a market of approximately 350 billion Pan-African. So that's significant demand. Banks don't serve these folks. Banks in a high yield environment would rather go for risk-free bonds, government bonds. It'll give them yields 10 to 12%. Even our money markets here have high yields. So their interest in deploying capital into SMMEs is quite low. And the traditional banking world just don't look at these businesses the way we do. They just don't have time for them. Our analysts look very deep into it. We look at the collateral that these businesses have. We make sure they're 2 times secured. And we make sure that their books, their professionalism, and the market size is there in terms of the scale that they're forecasting. Investor demand for yield and hedge. We know the world is yield starved in the more formal economies. While in Africa, we've got lots of yield that we can service relative to that demand. So the 2 focus pillars, let's look inward in terms of who we are. 2 clear, distinct aspects of the business. One's the Bitcoin treasury, and the one is the core operating business. The 2 arrows demonstrate that they're highly accretive. So our core operating business, profitable, it's private credit. We're expanding that private credit engine into capabilities where we'll do venture capital, where we'll do even seed stage funding, and pre-IPO buyout stage funding. So we are growing the maturity of the private credit engine to get more into the the VC world. We're not there yet. We're focusing just on the private credit engine yet. But in terms of the profitability there, it seeps right back into the Bitcoin treasury. The Bitcoin treasury allows us to grow, do LTVs, very conservative 30%, take that capital, deploy it back into our core operating business, and you start seeing this accretive, Bitcoin price independent flywheel that has significant impact, right? So this model demonstrates Bitcoin per share growth with an engine that has Bitcoin at its core. It shows BTC yield. It shows profitability in a pure TradeFi sense. But the key aspect of this is the human story. The fact that this capital is being deployed into jobs in Africa, and jobs in Africa mean something specifically. Let me show you in a different way how we present what we determine to be human yield. So as much as Bitcoin treasury companies talk about BTC yield, and they talk about MNAV, and they talk about accretive dilution, and they talk about the share price, etc., we're doing all of that. If you take a look at our website, you'll take a look at our analytics engine, you'll see the Bitcoin that we have on our balance sheet, our MNAV, our share price, all of these things real-time represented to you. But we think taking Bitcoin as collateral anywhere in the world, getting fiat drawn down to single digits and deploying it in this high impact way derives something quite beautiful, which we call human yield. So if you take a look at the slide, on the top, I did it as an iceberg, but at the top, you got the Africa Bitcoin Corporation managing our Bitcoin treasury. And underneath, it's driving the private credit business or cross-pollinating into the private credit business. And that's the deployment of that low interest rate capital into high yield SMME demand, which results in purpose, jobs, human impact, prosperity, and what we call human yield. And that's why Warren, our CEO, and myself are doing this. We are Africans. We've grown up in Africa. And a Bitcoin treasury company in Africa has to have human impact. It can't just have a materialistic, capitalistic impact. Yes, we will take care of our shareholders. Yes, we'll create a beautiful flywheel, but human impact is what gets us up every morning. When we see the SMMEs that we're deploying the capital into, we take a look at how the businesses are growing. We take a look at the impact that has on the society. We think that's a beautiful story. And we've deduced it down to 1 Bitcoin raised in our Bitcoin treasury equals 5 African jobs. Back of a napkin math, broadly speaking, we're still emerging, but we've demonstrating that 1 Bitcoin can actually have an impact on 5 jobs. And that's quite significant. So we're looking at that number very carefully, and it's actually on our dashboard. If you go to our real-time reporting engine, you'll see a human yield number on the Bitcoin that we've already aggregated in our Bitcoin treasury. Let's move on. So just in terms of capital and yield, and peeling that a little bit more so you understand what we mean by our market being high yield but low capital versus your markets in the United States being low yield but high capital. So let's unpack it. Market dynamic, capital availability in the US, high. In Africa, low. So what are we doing? Multi-listing venues to give access to investors, both sides, in Africa and internationally. That's why we're on multiple bourses across the world, and we will continue to do that, and as well as expanding out Pan-African across all the bourses. Cost of capital is low where you're from, it's high where we are. We'll utilize Bitcoin to lower our cost of capital, as I've described. Inflation, yes, high where we are, low. So reserves and profits denominated in Bitcoin gives us an escape away from currency fluctuations, inflation, debasement. We live debasement in a very intense and acute manner versus you folks. That's why Bitcoin is our savior. Capital mobility, easy. In Africa, very constrained. That's why multi-listing venues, again, gives us ease of mobility of those capital and access to those investors. Credit access, broad, limited. I can't take a property in Cape Town to Switzerland and lend money based upon that. It's risky, etc. But if I take Bitcoin, that is globally recognized collateral, pristine money, you can measure it in real time, you can see the wallet in real time, and you can see what we're doing with that in real time. Transparent, secure, instantaneous, and that's a beautiful thing. So our market dynamics are invented. In the USA, Bitcoin is used to generate yield. Example, STRC from Saylor. In Africa, ABC, that's us. We use Bitcoin to harvest our yield. So the team, I think it's very, very important. We may have the flywheel, we may have the listings, we may have the engine, we may have the demand, we may have all of that. But I think to execute against that, the reason we've demonstrated success to date on the strategy is we believe we've got the right management and the right executives and the right board steering the organization. So Warren, our founder, he's TradeFi. He has deep traditional finance experience, chartered accountant. He sits on several boards of pension funds in Africa, some of the largest in Africa. He's our CEO. I'm the Bitcoin maxi. I love Bitcoin, always have. I've been in it since 2014. and we balance each other out. I bring the Bitcoin drive. He brings the conservative trade fine. I think that's so important to have in the team. And we represent the board. So I am the executive chairman of the board. And we've really done a lot of work on our board to get our board lined up. We've actually changed out our auditors. So our auditors right now are Forbes Mazars. We had auditors before. In the last few months, we've changed them out because we wanted auditors that could oversee our Bitcoin treasury play. And Forbes Mazars are the best on the African continent. I would argue probably one of the best auditors in the world for crypto. And they are our auditors today. But what's very exciting is that name. Seyfuddin Ammous, the author of the Bitcoin standard, the fiat standard, the gold standard, principle of economics. He's part of our team. He's come on board as our Bitcoin strategic advisor. And the reason he did was because out of all the Bitcoin treasury companies, we were the company that were personifying the true essence of what he wrote in a lot of his literature. What was that? Taking Bitcoin, collateralizing it, bringing fiat down to its knees into single-digit percentage interest rates and deploying it into high yield to see human impact. For him, that's a beautiful story. And he believes the Bitcoin standard and the fiat standard is actually being personified in Africa today. And he's very excited about it. So it's great to have someone like him on the team. And I think it also gives us some validity in terms of our model and some credibility that we've got someone like that on the team. And I mean, this is the guy that orange-pilled Michael Saylor, and he continues to orange-pill folks globally around the world with his literature. It's great to have him on board. It's great to have him see what we're doing. And he came to South Africa in December, and he was blown away by what he sees us doing on the ground and what he sees Bitcoin doing for our people in terms of circular economies and just general acceptance. So we got the right team. We're very proud of our team. In terms of Africa, I thought I'd present this and just demonstrate the size of the market, not just in 350 billion SMM in demand, but just take a look at the size of our continent, the land. I think the Mercado maps lie to us all. If you take a look at the right-hand side, just take a look at, you could put China, India, Eastern Europe, Germany, USA, France, Spain, Portugal, Netherlands, Japan, and Great Britain into our continent. And there'll still be space left. That's the size of Africa. But what's exciting about Africa are three things. One, technologically speaking, three things. One is Bitcoin, pristine money. It's beautiful to see what's happening in Africa. Number two is private credit. Private credit is really one of the fastest moving aspects and currents in our water. And number three is artificial intelligence. We've seen our SMME target base mature significantly utilizing artificial cognitions, utilizing LLMs in their businesses, and skills, lack of skills, coding skills, etc. Africa is emerging, and AI is allowing us to unlock this latent human potential. So we've got 1.5 billion people. By 2030, we'll be 2 billion people. Our average age is 19. We've got more than 60% of our people below the age of 23. Fastest growing place on the planet, youngest place on the planet. More resources than anywhere else on the planet. The rare earths, water, etc. It's quite astonishing. 2.8 trillion GDP, fast accelerating. We're leapfrogging. We're going from nothing to Bitcoin, or we're going from complete debasement to perfect money, just like we went from nothing to mobile. And that's corporate liquidity. Enterprises in Africa, we always think of Africa as shacks or an informal economy that's not sophisticated. Well, our corporate space is incredible. Our corporates are holding on to $100 billion of dry powder. And we think we can give them access to pristine capital through our model. High inflation erodes savings. So although they're holding it, inflation is debasing them. High native yields, massive opportunity for foreign money coming into Africa. And that's what we're presenting. We're allowing you to invest in an engine that de-risks Africa, give you a pan-African view, and not giving you any exposure to local currency or political or any instabilities that you may stereotypically understand Africa to be. So currency, volatility, limited stores of value. And like I said, the SME credit gap is significant. So what makes us different? Let's go into this. The four key aspects of what makes our Bitcoin treasury company something very special. We lower the cost of capital. We bring in global liquidity, and we're an impact-driven organization, right? But there are four pillars that sit underneath us. Our Bitcoin treasury advantage. So we listed, we're the only Bitcoin treasury company on the JSE. We're the only place where you can do it in Africa. And that continental play is quite unique. There's no other Bitcoin treasury company in the world right now that represents an entire continent, right? 50-something countries. We are a large play, a large market. And we have access to all of that market from South Africa. And I think that's quite unique from a Bitcoin treasury perspective. Global low-cost funding, we can take Bitcoin anywhere in the world now. We've never had this before, which is beautiful. Utilize that Bitcoin to get fiat down on its knees and deploy it into our markets with high yields. Multi-market accessibility, trading across multiple bourses across the African continent and the world, and opening up those tracks to flow. And we think there's a beautiful liquidity story in time. Impact-driven growth, it has to be about human yield. It can't just be about BTC yield. It has to be about human yield. And we'll display that very clearly as the capital keeps coming in. So again, our flywheel, in short, accumulate Bitcoin, access cheaper capital, lower cost, broader access, grow our profits, deploy it back into the Bitcoin, lower the cost of capital. It's very clear, very simple model. So key aspects that I think is very, very important is what are we going to do with the Bitcoin? Yes, we got the right leaders. Yes, we got the right model, but there's some principles that we need to emanate. So Bitcoin Reserve is not operating capital. We don't deploy Bitcoin into SMMEs. We don't take our Bitcoin and touch our Bitcoin. We are long-term hodlers. When we accretively dilute, you buy our equity. The money that comes from that equity goes directly into Bitcoin. We don't sell that Bitcoin. We collateralize that Bitcoin. Very conservative, and we deploy that into highly securitized conservative loans. That's the model. So no influence on our lending decisions. Okay, loan portfolio is not based on price movements. Our lending business, our private credit business, and our Bitcoin treasury business are synonymous. They're synergistic, but they're very separate. They manage separately. They operate separately, even though they're synergistic. So defined exposure limits. We're not going to contaminate the one with the other. Transparency. We've got, take a look at our website, Africa Bitcoin Corporation. Click on analytics. You'll see how transparent we are. Our independence. I'm going to move here. I want to have some time for questions. We'll employ key discipline across our treasury and storage of our Bitcoin, multi-sig, international, cross-border, in reputable companies. We're Bitcoin only. We're not going to be Ethereum tomorrow or some other coin. Our liquidity inside of our business is very conservatively managed too. You can get a lot of this data in the slides that we'll share with you hereafter. So our value proposition is unique. Africa growth, asset exposure, attractive adjusted returns that are stable, conservative. We're not dependent on Bitcoin's price fluctuating up and down that impacts our MNAV and our overall value. We have a compounding flywheel, and we believe we have a structural advantage that's novel and unique on a global basis. What are we raising right now? Between $5 and $10 million, and we're looking for long-term capital, folks that believe in our story, that believe in Bitcoin, that believe that we can have this impact, and we can demonstrate this. So we're going to take the money, we're going to acquire Bitcoin, and we're going to keep the flywheel going with the Bitcoin. We've got folks on the ground in the United States. If you want to reach out, you can click on the links that's provided to book an appointment, or you can reach out to our local investor relation folks on the ground in the United States. So Harbor Access. We've also got Maxim have come on board, based in New York City, and we'll be there in February. So if any of you want to see us in person, we'll be there in February from the 11th of February all the way till the end of February. And we'd love to meet some of you in person if you'd like to meet. And that's the contacts that you can access on the ground. So I'm going to jump over to the Q&A and take a look at some other. Okay, I'm going to try and, I've got about 7 minutes. So let's see if I can address all these questions. So Roger Pearsall says, what are the top 2 things you must execute on in the next 12 months? I think number 1 is raising capital. We've been very focused on making sure that the business has all the substrates in place. So if you take a look at what we have right now, we don't have a lot of Bitcoin. And the reason we don't have a lot of Bitcoin is because we were not interested in smash buying into a pipe deal and buying $200 million of Bitcoin and having that on our balance sheet to get on some type of Bitcoin leaderboard. We're not driven by that, right? We're driven by human impact. We're driven by responsible, patient money. And that's how we are going to execute. So we're not just these excited Bitcoiners just running after capital to buy Bitcoin. We want to do it in a highly accretive, responsible way. So what's our top 2 priorities over the next 12 months? Raise capital and conservatively, accretively build our Bitcoin treasury. With that, deploy that into SMMEs and demonstrate tangibly this impact story and continue to do so. If we can do that slowly, methodically, with the right capital over the next 12 months, I think the share price and the overall company's profile will demonstrate returns for our shareholders. So that's our biggest focal point right now. Like I said, our private credit engine, we've just incremented our mandate by another $10 million. So fixed income capital allocators are liking the story. They're coming in on the private credit side, and that's also an opportunity to have a discussion with us. Your deck shows 22 to 26% IR expectation for equity. What's the path to hitting that, and what has to go right? What's the path to hitting that? I think it's what I've just described, is making sure that we have that flywheel working real accretively, watching our share price, watching our dilution, watching our MNAV, watching as the Bitcoin comes in, taking that Bitcoin, deploying it into our private credit business, making sure it's into the right SMMEs in a transparent manner, and then seeing that feed back up into the treasury again. If we can do that right, we'll win, and we're doing it today. So it's building on this engine, and it's a low-risk engine, and we're managing it well with a great team. So we're very, very confident of that. You mentioned 6 expansion countries ready to launch. Which ones gets funded first? What's the entire time? How much incremental capital do you need? So like I said, $5 million probably our minimum. We'd love to raise $10 million. $10 million, I don't have time right now to really unpack what we do. Very happy to do a meeting with you, Michael. 6 expansions. So what drives us per country is liquidity in that country, friendliness, Bitcoin friendliness, mature capital markets, economic stability, etc. So if you take a look at the countries that we've pegged, those are countries where we have relationships. We know the folks in the Federal Reserves, the folks that are defining policies, the stakeholders, the presidents, etc. That's very, very important in Africa, and that's driving that list of countries that you see. And we also think the locked up fixed income. So we're looking for places where Bitcoin doesn't even really exist. So if you take a look at Namibia, we went to Namibia, just recently listed there. They don't even regulate Bitcoin. Bitcoin is something that is kind of in purgatory. There's no up or down. There are no exchanges. There's no rule of law. There's nothing. So with us coming in gives folks an opportunity to buy our equity to gain exposure to the asset class. Also, fixed income allocators, pension funds, love our story. And with the rails there, it gives them an opportunity to come in on the private credit side. And again, when the private credit grows, the Bitcoin treasury grows. When the Bitcoin treasury grows, the private credit grows. Very synonymous. Let's see. Roger says, Victor says, your current pipeline is about 567 million. What is the biggest constraint? Capital, risk capital, sourcing good SMMEs. What's the biggest constraint? I think the biggest constraint right now is not raising capital for the private credit engine. Like I said, we've just raised another $10 million in that engine. We're 3 years old, and we've hit a magic timeline number for fixed income allocators. They want to see you listed for at least 36 months, and a proven track record gives them the ability to then deploy. So those gates are open, and we're very excited about that. Now what we need to do is prove what we can do with the Bitcoin, i.e. take the Bitcoin, do an LTV of 30%, no more than 30%, right? Highly over-collateralized, take the fiat, the stable coins that we can derive from there, convert that to fiat, deploy it into our private credit engine, and show that accretion. We've got to demonstrate that. So what's the biggest constraint? I think all the constraints have been moved out the way. Regulatory hurdles have been moved out the way. The model's been stress tested with the JSE. Our private credit pension funds are comfortable with what we're doing. We managed to get Bitcoin in our name. The board has changed. We've got the necessary governance and control. We had to move out our auditors. Like I said, Forbes Mazars is now auditors. We had to get all of the mechanics in place to ensure folks like yourselves, when you do your due diligence, have the peace of mind that, wait a minute, these folks have right leadership, proper board practices, good governance, full oversight and audit. They're publicly traded. They've done the openness, the transparency. They're able to. So I think the big constraints are actually out the way. So risk appetite, yeah, I guess you could say that the Bitcoin treasury market right now is in bear territory. We don't care about whether it's bear or bull. We have a model here of pent-up demand. We're going after the $350 billion worth of SMMEs. If we can grab, 10 to 20% of that market in the next 5 years, utilizing Bitcoin, I think we'll have happy shareholders. So we just need to make sure that we demonstrate the risk mitigation properly, and hopefully I've done some of that today. As more listers globally add Bitcoin to the balance sheet, what will still make ABC's approach distinct and investable versus just another Bitcoin treasury name? Hopefully I've answered that question, that we're not just another Bitcoin treasury. And I hope there's more Bitcoin treasuries like us, because that will make the Bitcoin price go up. If all of us are buying Because what I don't like at the moment, philosophically, I'm speaking with my Bitcoin hat on right now. I don't like that people are just buying Bitcoin and sitting on it. I think it's a bad demonstration of the asset. I think we can do so much more with it. And ABC is demonstrating that. So we're not just another Bitcoin treasury company. We have human yield, we have high impact, we're Pan-African, and we're highly accretive. And I think that really is novel and differentiating. I'm out of time. It's 30 minutes on the clock. I see a lot of the questions. I will make sure that we answer those questions after the session. Thank you so much for today, and hope to see you all as shareholders in time. If not, please meet with us. We will be in New York next month. Thank you.